Oh, thanks. Welcome, everyone. This is an overview of our PBIS applications, and these are tools to help you implement school-wide PBIS with fidelity. Some of you look familiar. I swear, Kristen, I've seen you before. I'm 99, yes. And I've probably seen others of you before, but I swear when I hit 55, my memory is just the worst. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Nadia Sampson. This is a much younger photo of me, but this is what I look like now after the pandemic and after hitting 55. I am a PBIS app training team member. I have had lots of different roles on that team. I have been the team lead. I right now work about half-time on PBIS apps or the training team and half-time on a check and checkout grant. I've worked for Educational and Community Supports, which is the research unit that we work in. I'm going to introduce a couple other folks to you that I've worked in for the past 27 years. Kent McIntosh is our director. Formerly, it was Rob Horner. And we are, PBIS Apps is housed in the College of Education at the University of Oregon in Educational Community Supports, which is the research unit. So we're like an onion. And PBIS Apps is right there in the onion, one of the central pieces of the onion. I have with me today Danielle Triplett, who has worked for ECS in the past and now is back on the training team. Very wonderful to have her. And a new member that I'm just getting to know and enjoying getting to know is Heather Hatton. And Heather comes to us from Missouri. From Missouri. And she will be working with us predominantly or a large amount around tier 3 implementation. And Danielle will be helping me with some tier 2 stuff and some tier 1 stuff. So I'm really excited to have them here. Today, what I want to talk about is identifying what applications are available at PBIS Apps, understand the purpose and the function of each one of those, and then what resources are available. I would love to hear from all of you what your experience is, because we don't have too many people here. If you would be willing to share either in the chat or unmute yourselves and tell me a little bit about yourselves and what you're most interested, which application you might be most interested in hearing about today. And let me get up those different applications. These are the different applications: Swiss, check and check out, Swiss, iSwiss, PBIS assessment, and PBIS evaluation. Would anybody kind of want to introduce yourself and tell me what you know, what you want to know about these different applications, where you are in terms of your implementation? Anyone?
I am Kristen. I live in South Portland, Maine, and I coach some teams in Portland and down the coast of Maine. I got trained by you in check and check out, and I'm about to have to deliver training to a school that's finally ready to use that. So I wanted to review that. One of the systems is also looking at PBIS evaluation, and I don't know a lot about that. So I'd like to know more about that as well.
Great. Anyone else?
My name is Cheyenne, and I am a school counselor for a small charter school. I am just kind of stepping into this role full time, and I'm not as familiar with some of these apps as I feel like I should be. That's kind of why I'm here today. So we do have Swiss, and I'll be getting trained on Swiss soon. But I'm just kind of wanting education. So
okay. And Cheyenne, when you say stepping into this role, do you mean a PBIS coach or PBIS coordinator or team member?
Yeah, so I'm a new school counselor.
Gotcha.
This is the first year I'm doing that, and then I guess I'm the coordinator.
Okay. I know, isn't it fun when you're first starting? It's been amazing, especially since the pandemic, where right after the pandemic or during the pandemic, people were getting on these webinars. They're like, I'm not exactly sure what my title is, but I was just supposed to come to this webinar, and I'm really excited about my new job. So welcome.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Fung, and I also just started with my local school district. And so I'm a coordinator. This is being implemented district-wide, and I think depending on the school, it's implemented at different levels. So I'm just curious to learn more about it and how I can support in strengthening them at the schools that need it most.
Great, great. Is it Mariah?
Yeah, it's Mireya.
Maria. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, so I just started as a site support TOSA at my school, and one of my responsibilities will be in supporting PBIS
And where are you?
in California.
California. Fung, I forgot to ask, where did you say where you were?
I'm also in California. I'm in Northern
California. Okay, so
Mhm.
we've got California, Portland, Maine. We also have a Portland, Oregon. Danielle's from Portland, Oregon. And Cheyenne, where did you say you're from?
Idaho.
Idaho. Oh, okay.
Oh.
I've got family in Idaho. I've done a lot of training in Idaho. Great. Anita, do you want to let us know?
Peter
Or
wrote
maybe
in
you
the
did
chat, Mad,
Perfect.
that they are the PBIS coach in a juvenile detention center in Kentucky. They have PBIS on the school side of the building. The Department of Juvenile Justice has finally come on board so we can have one cohesive PBIS system throughout the building. They're primarily interested in Swiss, check in, check out, and assessment.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, we don't have a ton of juvenile justice settings, but we do have some that are using our different applications. So I think that's always really exciting because juvenile justice tends to be incredibly punitive. And so anytime we can bring a different perspective into that, I think that's wonderful. So welcome. Thanks, Anita. Okay. So what is PBIS apps? Well, some of you have kind of touched on some of these things. PBIS apps, they're web-based educational tools. So they're tools that different schools, districts, sometimes they're adopted by an entire state, that folks use to support their implementation of multi-tiered systems of support. Some of the tools more lend themselves more to outcome data. Others look more at implementation fidelity. So we'll talk through, and I really am giving kind of a balcony level view of each one of these. If you end up going through one of our trainings, I think Cheyenne said, oh, she's going through a Swiss training. Kristen did the check and checkout training with me. You get a much more in-depth perspective of each one of those tools. So you won't get exactly the how-tos on this, but we will give kind of an overview of what each one of these tools can do for your schools. Okay, so PBIS applications, if you're looking to see which products we have, I think it's so weird to call them products. That came about when we got a marketing communication team. I just don't think of them as products, but that is what they are. We have, if you go to our website, pbisapps.org, you can actually learn more about each one of these by clicking on the products tab, and then clicking on any one of these will give you an overview of each one of the instruments and what they do. So it's just another way to get some more information about them. And I will also show you some resources. Anytime you go to the resources tab, you can actually say which tool you're most interested in looking at, which product, and you'll get different resources particular to that particular tool. We can go there in just a little bit. So sometimes people come in and they're like, well, where do we start? You know, do I start with assessment? Do we use Swiss, check and check out Swiss, evaluation, iSwiss? Some of that is really dictated by what your district is doing in that moment, what schools you're working with, and where they are in their implementation. So some of that is really dictated by that. There are other ways to think about how other considerations you might take into account when you're thinking about where to start in terms of which tool to use or which evidence-based practice to even start with. And so thinking about what phase of PBIS are we in? Are we implementing at tier 1 and we really want to start with an instrument that's going to bolster that's going to help us with our implementation? Or are we pretty strong at tier 1 and tier 2? So we want to not only use Swiss, but maybe check in, check out Swiss. Tier 3, maybe we haven't even started there. And so using iSwiss, for example, wouldn't make a lot of sense. But there's a really cool tool. And you can get this this tool on implementation.fpg.unc.edu. I think it might also be on PBIS apps, but it helps you kind of organize or frame what is going on for your district or school. What do we need right now? What are our priorities, personnel wise, district wide, school wide? What is it that we feel like we need to focus on right now? Where should we put our efforts? Rob Horner always said, go for the low hanging fruit. And his phrase for that was always, what can you do? What's the smallest thing you can do that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck? And so sometimes just starting there is where you might want to start. But this tool actually allows you to, it helps you kind of prioritize where you want to be. So EBP might be an evidence-based practice. So you might put something in here like check and check out. Or if you're looking at which tool to use around PBIS apps, maybe you put Swiss in here and you talk about, well, what's the need? How does this fit with our current priorities? Is it available to us? Do we have, for example, a Swiss facilitator? Do we have people to enter data? Evidence, what's the evidence that shows that this tool or this evidence-based practice actually works? Are we ready for this? And do we have the capacity to implement? So there's just an idea of a way to think about a way to look at an evidence-based practice, or maybe the tools that we have available to you, or the combination of the two, about where should we start. So there's different ways to do that. This is just one tool that we encourage people to use. So when we're talking about school-wide PBIS, we're always looking at outcomes. And part of getting to the outcomes that we want to get to is looking at our data, our systems, and our practices. And equity is always at the center of that. We're always trying to get more equitable outcomes for our students. So that's really important to remember. The circles didn't used to have equity in the middle, and that's kind of a newer piece, but it's important to remember that we're looking at systems. What are the systems that support staff behavior to get us to those outcomes? What are the practices that support students, the behavior supports that we have for students that are going to get us to better outcomes for our students? And how are we going to use our data? How are we going to make sure that we have the data systems and practices in place to actually look at our data and use it for decision making? Because we're always trying to get to better social competence, academic achievement for all of our students. So there's a new graphic that you'll probably start to see soon that outlines what do we mean by data. And if you go to the tiered fidelity inventory, if any of you are using that, and I promise in my next webinar I will pull this graphic in, it actually takes the different pieces of the tiered fidelity inventory and maps them onto data, practices, and systems. Because sometimes when we're talking about data, practices, systems, we're like, well, talking about what data? What data are you talking about? What systems do you mean? And what practices? And the TFI actually does, if any of you are familiar with it, actually does a nice job of giving us what those criteria or critical features are. So one of the things that we know too is that the factor related to high sustainability in school-wide PBIS, and this study was done by Kent McIntosh. I don't really know who Kim is. But Kathleen Strickland Cohen, Rob Horner, and a couple other folks. I'm sorry, I don't know their first names, but these are all people that we're generally familiar with. And what they found when they were doing this research, when they looked at what's the feature, what's the thing that schools are doing who are having high sustainability, who are keeping PBIS implementation going with high fidelity, what are these schools doing? What do they have in common? And then one of the things was, and the highest priority was the frequency that data are presented to all school staff. So how can we show our staff that their efforts, that what we're doing is making a difference? And that's really important when we're talking about fidelity of implementation, because fidelity and outcome data are absolutely attached. We need to know as adults that our fidelity of implementation, what we said we were going to do, is having the desired effect on the outcomes. And if it's not, what can we do differently? What do we need to do that will make change so that we can get closer to those outcomes? Okay. So thinking about as you're working with your schools, and some of you said you were new to this role, is what is the data that we want to be sure that we're showing to our staff on a regular basis, that we might be showing to our school board, that we might be showing to our administrators, to our district staff? What's the information that will show them or demonstrate for them where we're doing well, where we're experiencing less success, and where we might need more support? So just things to keep in mind as you're starting on your new job. What kind of data are you going to be looking at? And as I said before, so fidelity and outcome data are really tied. They are absolutely tied together, because we can't actually know if something's working unless we check to see that what we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing, right? So if we're not implementing, for example, check in, check out the way it was designed, and we're getting really poor outcomes for our students, well, we might accidentally say to ourselves, well, check in, check out doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And if we sometimes what we do is we check our outcome data before we check our fidelity of implementation. If we make sure that we're checking to see that we're doing what we said we were going to do, and let's say we are, and we're getting the outcomes we want, great. But if we're not, we can't just throw that intervention away and say, see, it doesn't work, because we actually haven't implemented it in the way it was designed, that the evidence and the research shows us that it should be designed that will get us to those outcomes. So really, really important that we check our fidelity of implementation before we just throw something out or say something is or isn't working. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah. I'm seeing some nods. Good. Okay. So fidelity, did we implement the strategies, the practices, the way we said, the way they were designed? And are we getting closer to our goals? Our current reality, here's where we are, and here's where we want to be for our students and staff. Okay, the goals or our outcomes. So the different instruments or the different tools that we have that help guide us in getting this information. Swiss and check and check out Swiss, for example, are tools that get us to outcome data. They're letting us know how our students are doing in check and check out, as well as behavior wise in terms of office discipline referrals. They're not the only data that we want to look at in terms of outcome data. There are other pieces of data in schools that you want to use as well, attendance, grades. There are other pieces of information, but these are just two that we have available with PBIS apps. PBIS evaluation and iSwiss, and I'll talk more about these, actually combine fidelity and outcome data. You can actually get fidelity data and outcome data on both of from both of these instruments. Whereas PBIS assessment is pretty much all about fidelity data. There's a little bit of information you can get that you might call outcome data on PBIS assessment. For the most part, though, PBIS assessment is measuring our behavior as adults. Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And it's helping us guide us on where we might need to make some changes in terms of our implementation. Okay, so PBIS assessment. Some of you were just on the last webinar, so you heard me talk about PBIS assessment for a whole hour. I'm just going to talk for a couple minutes here. PBIS assessment is an application or a product or a tool that we have available that is completely free. It doesn't cost you a thing. And you can actually access it on our website. You can actually look at a demo account of PBIS assessment when you go to our website, and there's a demo button. And if you click demo, you'll come to a page, and there'll be a place where you can click on PBIS assessment so you can see a demonstration of it. But what this PBIS assessment does is really gives you a space to manage your survey data. There's a bunch of surveys in PBIS assessment. They're all, again, all free. You wouldn't want to take them all at once, but they measure different things. They measure your fidelity of implementation of PBIS. They might, some of the tools get the perspective of your stakeholders. But there's different tools in there that help you get a big picture and a detailed picture of how our fidelity of implementation with PBIS is going. And you use that data to build action plans so that you can move forward to make changes so that you're ensuring that what you are doing is what you said you were going to do and what the research and the evidence says we should be doing in terms of getting the outcomes we want. Okay. So again, it's totally free. You can become a coordinator. It's got a bunch of different surveys. This is just kind of a screenshot of this. Some of these instruments have been retired, some of them, but most of them are still here. For example, there's a benchmarks of quality for early childhood programs that assesses how well they're doing with their PBIS implementation. I can't remember if that does tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. I can't quite remember. Feedback and input survey actually gives you an opportunity to send out links to different stakeholders at the elementary level, family, school personnel, or at your secondary schools. That actually allows you to get feedback and input from your stakeholders about how well they perceive you're doing with your PBIS assessment, what they actually can give you feedback and say, here's what would help. Here's what I'd love for you to do differently. This is what's working. This is what I don't understand. And you get some qualitative as well as quantitative data in that. So I'm just kind of giving you examples. Those are just a couple of examples. There's also a school climate survey where you get information and data from your stakeholders. And then the tiered fidelity inventory, the TFI, is another one that's used to level your success of implementation for tiers 1, tiers 2, and tier 3. It's probably the most widely used tool right now. It's the one we kind of tell people to go to, because no matter where you are in your implementation, if you're just now focusing on tier 1, you can just do the tier 1 section. You can just answer the questions, the fidelity questions related to tier 1. If you're also doing tier 2, you can answer the questions related to tier 2 with your team. This is a coach guided instrument. So you as a coach or you as a coordinator would sit with a team and actually go through these questions and answer them a 2, 1, or a 0 in terms of what level of implementation you are at. And then you take those items and you say, here's what we're going to do differently. Here's where we got a 0. Here's where we got a 1. And we're going to do some things differently. And here's who's going to do what by when to get us closer to a level of fidelity that we feel will get us to better outcomes. Okay. Most of the tools are similar to that. You're really trying to build an action plan from these tools so you know what you want to do differently in the coming years. The important part of being a coordinator for PBIS assessment is you do think about using that hexagon tool, or think about what you know about the district. Think about what you know about the different schools. Which of these tools, which one of these instruments would make the most sense in terms of looking at our fidelity of implementation? This slide I need to change. Some of these are no longer available, like the SET and the ISET we don't even use anymore. But which of these tools is going to give us the information that we need to move forward at our level of implementation, where we are right now? And which tool will help us get to the next level of implementation in terms of maybe tier 2. So maybe we barely started working on tier 2, but we're going to go ahead and take that section so we can start to prioritize the different items that we're going to want to work on to give us the biggest bang for our buck, so we can get the momentum going to implement that level of support for our students. So surveys, you can do progress monitoring. You can look at the different survey data across years. You could do some of them, you'll just do annually. You'll say, we're going to do this once a year, or we're going to do this survey at the beginning of the year and the end of the year. We use these surveys in our research to see what schools are doing, how well schools are doing, how many schools are implementing PBIS around the country, around the world. And we de-identify all that data. It's not, we don't look at confidential information. So I do need to update this slide though. Okay, so for surveys on PBIS assessment to even make it into PBIS assessment, they have to be reliable and evidence-based. So we've looked at these tools and we said they have validity and reliability. They need to be consistent across all states. So if your state has made your own version of the TFI, for example, it's not probably going to fit. You're not going to be able to put that information in here. There's one TFI, and that's how you would enter that data in here. So it's not tool by tool, state by state. It's the tools that are being used nationwide, sometimes worldwide. We have other countries using PBIS and using PBIS assessment. And we tried, one of the reasons we've retired some of those surveys that you saw when I was saying, oh, that one's not available anymore, is because really we had surveys that were duplicating the efforts of a different survey. So we try to keep the surveys so that we're not duplicating. Oh, if you take this survey, you're basically going to get the same information you would get if you took this survey. So as you're becoming a coordinator, as you work with your schools, think about which tiers, which tools do I want to use right now with my schools? How many times are we going to take this? We have people report to us that are at the school level that say our coordinator or our coach had us doing every single one of these surveys. And it was too much. Trying to action plan from that much information can be overwhelming and really not useful. So think about where you want to start. I think the tiered fidelity inventory is a great place to start. Others of you who have used this application or used the different tools might say, no, we actually started here with this instrument. So just consider that, think about that. And you can read about each one of these instruments on PBIS apps, as well as in the demo on PBIS assessment, where I showed you on that homepage. You can click on demos and you can actually, there's an opportunity to look at each one of these tools, and it gives a description of each one of the surveys. So you have a better idea of what each one of them does, what it measures. Okay. I'll also show you under resources where you can see some of these tools. But this is just an example of some of the tools and what they do. So this first one was the tiered fidelity inventory. Well, what does it do? How do we use it? Same with the school climate survey, another one that's used frequently, sometimes in combination with the TFI, because the TFI is done by the team. Whereas the school climate survey, you're actually getting stakeholder information. You're hearing from students, staff, I don't remember if it's families, but you're hearing from folks in your community. You're getting their perspective. Doing this in combination with the TFI, now you're getting the perspective of the team that's actually working to implement, and now and in combination with what stakeholders are perceiving. So that can give you a really big, nice, complete picture of where you might want to action plan from those two different perspectives, which can be really useful, because sometimes as a team, we think we're doing this and it's going great and everything's wonderful. And then we start to realize that our stakeholders, our teachers, our students, our families are saying, we don't really know what you're doing, or this isn't really working for us. And here's why. So getting both those different pieces of information is really, really helpful. Or it can confirm that you're doing a wonderful job and everyone's on the same page, which is even better. The reports you can get those reports very quickly when you put the data in. You can get the data back out with different levels of reports. You can look at subscales, scales. You can look at the individual items. You can look at a total score. So there's different levels to the data that you can use for action planning, which is really helpful of how detailed do we want to get right now? What do we want to prioritize? So, and then you get to see your progress over time. How did we do total score last year versus this year? Well, what about the subscale of the tier 1 scale this year versus the tier 1 scale last year? Have we made improvements? Things like that. So we can really progress monitor how we're doing. Okay. Not going to talk too much more. This is all available on the website. If you go to under products and click products on our website and then find the PBIS assessment section, you can click on this and all of this information is available to give you a better overview of what PBIS assessment does. But it's really about monitoring your fidelity of implementation. How well are we implementing PBIS? What do we need to do to make it go even better and engage in a continuous quality improvement cycle that will bring us closer to the goals that we're looking for? Okay. Did I mention that's free? It's free. You don't hear that very often anymore, so we like to say it. This page is also, as you look on our webpage, you'll scroll down after you start looking at PBIS assessment, and you'll get to a part where it says try the demo. So this is another place you can click and try the demo, look around in there. You could find a coordinator. You do need to have someone that's coordinating using these assessments, and maybe that's you. Some of you have identified yourselves as, well, I'm the new coordinator. You'd want to get in touch with us by filling out a coordinator form, and that coordinator form gives us the information we need about which districts, which schools are you working with, so that when you log in to PBIS assessment, those schools, districts, organizations show up, so you can open surveys for them. You can look at the reports for them. All of that allows you to really do what you need to do for the schools or organizations that you are affiliated with. Okay. And that coordination form, if you click on this, you'll actually see that coordinator form on PBIS apps. Okay. There's also a couple of different manuals that I would encourage you. And I can't remember if I sent these to this group or the previous group, but there's the assessment survey and evaluation guide that talks you through the different surveys and what they do. And then there's the assessment users manual that kind of gives you more of that point and click. How do I use PBIS assessment? How do I navigate around in here? Those are two really good manuals that you'll want to download and take a look at, okay, and keep handy. And then there's also the different tools are actually here. If you want to see the paper copy of the actual survey that you might want to use, because you don't see the paper copy. Usually you're not filling out these surveys on paper. You're usually doing them online. Some coordinators say, no, I want everyone on the team to have a copy of the survey that we're doing, and we're coming to consensus, but I want them all to be able to read about it. But most of the surveys, you're doing one, for example, a tiered fidelity inventory. Not every team member is filling out the tiered fidelity inventory. The team is coming to consensus, and those are the scores that are put in. With the feedback and input surveys, you are pulling data from multiple people. So there's different ways to collect the data, and it depends on the tool that you're using. This is the coordinator form. I thought I had it in here somewhere. This is the coordinator form that I told you about that you'll fill out. So you'll give us some information about you. You'll even tell us what password you want. And then you'll put what districts you're going to be working with. If you're working with all the schools in a district, you just need to put the district name. If you're working with a district, but only some of the schools, then we would want you to list the schools that you're working with. So we don't give you access to schools that you actually aren't supposed to have access to. We'll just give you access to the schools you need to have access to. And that can change, and you can always let us know, hey, I need you to add this school or this district to my scope on PBIS assessment. So this is Rob Horner always says this: you never initiate an intervention without having a plan for evaluating the implementation of that intervention. And that's truly what PBIS assessment is about. It's evaluation. It's evaluating whether we're doing what we said we were going to do. So we're confident that the outcomes we're looking at match up and make sense with regard to our implementation. Okay. All right. Questions about assessments? No? Okay. Swiss Suite. Some of you said you were most interested in the Swiss Suite. Somebody also said assessment at one point, but we did that. Now, introduction to the Swiss Suite. So when I say Swiss Suite, it means I'm talking about the 3 applications that are available in Swiss. There are 3. And those are, my phone's going crazy. Go away. There are 3 applications. The first one that we developed was Swiss. And Swiss is really looking at your primary prevention or your universal level of PBIS because it's available to all students in the sense that any student in your school could get an office discipline referral. And we use that data to make decisions about which students might need more support, which parts of our school, maybe we've got hallways that are where there's a lot of problem behavior. Maybe it's certain classrooms, maybe it's a time of day, and you can connect all those things together to come up with a precise statement that says, during 5th period, between 1 and 2 o'clock, we have 54 3rd graders engaging in inappropriate language, and it appears that the motivation is to gain peer attention. So you're getting really, really precise about what's happening. So then you can tackle that with the least amount of resources you need to get a change, to get the outcomes, the better outcomes that you're looking for. So Swiss is kind of global, but at the same time, you can look very closely. There's something called a drill down in there where you can tie things together carefully so that you can come up with statements that you can work from rather than kind of primary statements where we're like, the cafeteria is out of control. Cafeteria is out of control tells me that we might have a problem in the cafeteria, but I don't know how many students. I don't know which lunch that is. I don't know what the behavior is. So we get much more precise so we can, our PBIS team can come up with interventions and strategies to address the real problem as opposed to kind of those global problems that we see. Check-in, check-out is for targeted or small groups of students. Typically, that's about 15% of our school population that might need a little bit more. So check-in, check-out Swiss collects check-in, check-out data. Sometimes check-in, check-out is called something else, and that's fine. The intervention, if you're going to use check-in, check-out Swiss, has to involve a point card. That point card needs to be consistent across all students, and it's based on your school-wide expectations. So it's targeting a smaller group of students, and we're trying to make sure they get extra support in terms of understanding and being able to demonstrate those school-wide expectations so that they can have more success. And then iSwiss used to be called ISIS Swiss. We had to change that. iSwiss is really looking at individualized interventions. So sometimes there's, 3 to 5% of our students need more support. We're still trying to base whatever support we give them on those school-wide expectations, but we also have to sometimes get more precise about what that problem behavior is or that behavior is that we want to address. It could be things like hand raising. It could be head hitting. It really can vary from in terms of severity. And iSwiss is incredibly flexible. So you really develop strategies and plans and you collect data that is very specific to an individual student's behavior and what level of support they need. So it's a little more complicated. We don't train on it quite as frequently. Heather is actually going to become our primary trainer for iSwiss, and she just started with us, and she's being trained by our previous tier 3 coordinator. But so those are the different pieces of iSwiss. Of the Swiss Suite. Swiss, check-in, check-out Swiss, and iSwiss. What we know too, and it's something important to remember, is that all specialized interventions are much more effective and efficient and durable if we start at the foundation. We sometimes the temptation is there to go to the students who have really gotten our attention that appear to have the highest needs. What we know is if we can get our tier 1 solidly in place, we're going to catch more students than we would have if we didn't have that in place. So catching students, 80% of our students at tier 1 being safe, respectful, responsible will reduce the number of students that we potentially will need to serve at those higher levels of secondary and tertiary. So getting your tier 1 in place, we've seen this over and over again with schools across the country, especially since the pandemic, have had to go back to looking at their tier 1 and really re-implementing and refocusing on getting tier 1 in place so that they're not putting out fires. They actually have that tier 1 in place and can more strategically address the needs of students at tier 2 or tier 3 who really, really need those levels of support. I probably said way more than I was supposed to right there, but so we like to think of the Swiss suite of applications. Yes, it's a web application. It's also a data collection system, but it really helps us make decisions. It's a decision system. It helps us look at our data and engage in a conversation around continuous quality improvement. It really helps us focus in on where the problems are and what we need to do in order to get to those outcomes that we're looking for our students, whether that's or school-wide, more tier 2, students that need tier 2, a little more support, or students at the individual level who need much more individualized supports. Okay. So all of these things are true, but trying to keep in mind that we're looking about using our data for decision making, and that's what the Swiss suite of tools is about. So I keep talking about this continuous quality improvement, and I mentioned this a minute ago about with the Swiss suite. We're looking at our current status. We're looking at our data and we're saying, wow, we had this many office discipline referrals in the cafeteria by this many students at this time of day. And then we're saying, what's our goal? How much do we want to reduce this problem in this particular area or with this particular behavior? What's our goal? And then we'll develop solutions very focused on the goals that we've established. We implement those solutions with integrity and fidelity. We monitor to see if we're getting to the outcomes we want to get to. And then we reassess and revise as needed. Continuous quality improvement is just that. It's continuous. We know in schools that last year it might have been the cafeteria. This year it's the hallways. Things change. And so we're constantly needing to engage in looking at our data and changing up what we're doing based on our context and what's happening with and for our students. Okay, so Swiss. Why was it developed? To make schools more effective learning environments, repeatedly giving people the right information at the right time, okay? It's school-based. It's used with teams on the ground in schools. A lot of times the systems that schools have been using and still are using and are very important are systems that really serve the needs of our state or district or even the feds. It's these state reportable offenses. It's a big picture. It's not precise. So Swiss gives you information that you can use, teams can use on the ground to get to better outcomes. And that's really important to remember. And it doesn't mean that those other systems aren't important, but using them together can be much more effective so that you're looking at all the data you need to make good decisions. We know too that problem behavior, we're even changing that behavior, whether it's a problem or it's just behavior, is the primary reason students are excluded from classrooms and academia. They're being excluded based on the behavior and they're not getting the instruction. Oftentimes those are students who really need that instruction. They need that, they need to be in the classroom and getting that support. And so it's really important that we look at behavior and try to get as precise as we can about what's happening. So it looks at ODRs, it summarizes information. You can look at general school-wide data. You can look at individual subgroups. You can look at different date ranges, look at different contexts. to help you, your team's action plan and come up with solutions or interventions that will help. This is the dashboard. These are just some of the graphs that you can get with Swiss. You can get average referrals per day per month, referrals by time, referrals by location, by week, by problem behavior. There's a couple others that are referrals by grade, referrals by student. What are the latest referrals? Do we have some data integrity issues we need to address? So all sorts of reports, including a suspension expulsion report, an equity report, and we have lots of training around equity. Do we have disproportionality in our schools? Do we have a disproportionate number of students on IEPs getting office discipline referrals and being excluded? Are Black students being referred disproportionately? Are Asian students? We can gather that information and get really precise about what's happening and get to the who, what, when, where, and why those things are happening. So we can develop solutions that address that disproportionality and provide support to our students in a better, more positive way. You can also look at things multi-year, so you can see, well, are we still having the same problems in these different places, or are the problems new? Didn't we address this last year? It's come back up again. Did we stop doing something that we need to re-engage in? There's also this really cool thing called the drill down. And there are some videos on the drill down. This is what allows you to take this information and tie it together. Okay, allows you to get to the who, what, when, where, and why. So you can get really precise. It may look like it's the 5th grade students in the classroom. The only way to verify that that is what's happening is to do my drill down and start to weed out and get really clear about the who, what, when, where, and why. And we use drill down to do that. That's the drill down. Check in, check out Swiss, tier 2 supports, targeted or group based. It's efficient for large groups of students, up to 10 to 15% of your students. That really depends on the capacity of your school, how many staff you have available. Really large schools, 10 to 15% could be a whole lot of students. So you need to be sure that you actually have the staff available to implement check in, check out, and use the tool for decision making. It provides check in, check out. The intervention provides additional structure and feedback to students about how they're behaving, what they're doing well, what they need to work on. And the data is there that you can share with students and collect from students to show them what they need to be doing differently to have success, but also show them where they're doing really, really well to support them to keep doing that behavior. This is the check-in, check-out dashboard. This is just an example. These are the students that are enrolled in this particular account. What's their success rate? What's their average percent of points? This is giving me more of a school-wide report, so I can kind of see how is check-in, check-out, how are we doing? Are we implementing check-in, check-out so that most of our students are having success? This is a funky little graph called a whisker graph. I'm not going to go into it, but it actually does give you some really good information. And if you go through the training, you can learn how to use it in a way that really helps you look at, is check-in, check-out working in our school? And if not, then you can dive into, well, what are we doing or not doing? It's really efficient to enter data. You just take a student's card. Those cards are handed in usually to a coordinator at the end of the day. And that coordinator just enters for each period what point, how many points did the student get per period. You'll get the percent, the average percent of points for that student. It shows up on a graph. And you can see which students are doing well, where are they doing well, where are they not doing so well, so that the team, the tier 2 team, can come together and help make decisions for students that will help them to have more success. It can also identify possibly students who might need more support. You've identified that, okay, we're going to try check in, check out, and then you realize, wow, we've done check in, check out with high fidelity and this student's still struggling. We might need to move this student to more individualized supports. So it gives you that information as well. average daily points by student. You can look at individual period reports. So across a student's day, how well are they doing across those different periods? And when I say period, if you're in elementary school, those periods might be divided up by block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. Maybe everybody does reading in the morning, then they have math, and so there's different ways to actually set up the template for your school so that it makes sense. Questions about Swiss and check in, check out Swiss before I go to iSwiss? Anything? Okay. I'm talking a lot, so please jump in. Any of you using Swiss right now? Somebody said that they were. At least one person said they were using Swiss right now. Can't remember who that was. I know Kristen's using check in, check out. And I think, not sure she's here anymore. Shai was one that was just about to go through that training. Okay. So iSwiss. iSwiss, as I said, very individualized. It's really for students who need a higher level of support. You can measure just about anything with this. You can measure the number of times Danielle's been tapping her pencil. How many times did she raise her hand and ask a question? How many times did she not raise her hand to ask a question? How many talk outs did a student have? You can measure behaviors that you want to reduce. You can measure behaviors that you want to increase. So lots of difference. You can do rate, duration, all sorts of things, very individualized, very specific. Usually more someone with tier 3 expertise or a behavior specialist helps to lead this effort. And it's delivered to a smaller group of students, and it looks different for each student. Okay. It's not like check and check out Swiss or Swiss where it looks pretty much the same for all students. So it collects stakeholder information. You can have parents as part of your teams, and you can upload information about that. You can upload assessments, behavior support plans, data sheets, meeting notes, all sorts of things can go into iSwiss. And you're looking at both implementation and outcomes. So you can collect fidelity data. How well did we do? How well did the aide do? Or how well did we do in implementing the plan that day? And then look at that in comparison to how is the student doing? When we were at high fidelity, did the student have more green days or days where they were meeting their goal? So you can compare those two things right on the same graph, which is pretty cool. These are just some examples of different behaviors. So you can, we have a student, Carly Johnson. We want them to be, Carly to be able to speak clearly. We're looking at her average daily percent of points. So 85% of the times we collected data, she was doing well, staying on task, 80% using the strategies that we've outlined for her, which those would be more specifically outlined in the application. So we're able to look at several different things, even for just one student. You can set up, I think, as many measures as you want. So have to be careful with that. iSwiss is not typically the place you start in terms of using these applications because it is a little more complicated. We tend to say people start with Swiss, use it for a little while, then move on to check in, check out Swiss, use that for a while. And then if you need iSwiss, move on to iSwiss. Sometimes people do it in a different order. And we understand contextually that that might just be what works for schools. Okay. Okay, let's see. This is just giving you kind of a roadmap of, I just said this, right? So installation, it can take a little bit of time. I think 1 to 2 years is a little long. I think most schools could start using Swiss within a few months or even a few weeks of getting a facilitator. You do have to have a facilitator trained. And they could start using it pretty quickly. It involves getting that facilitator trained. There's a readiness evaluation. There's a license. There's some training that the facilitator that you've identified does for those 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 6, 3 to 8 staff members. And then there's ongoing training and coaching by the PBIS coach and or the facilitator. There's annual readiness checks. So as staff change, as people come in and out of schools, we want our facilitators to continue to check to make sure schools are meeting readiness. You provide user or team booster trainings so that new people come in and they're part of the team and they need access to the application. The facilitator does that. And you, as if you become a Swiss or check in, check out Swiss or an iSwiss facilitator, you then get the support of our team at our office. We're kind of like your facilitators or coaches in terms of how to use the applications. Questions about the Swiss Suite in general. I didn't talk a lot about the training, but at the very end, I'll go to the website and I'll show you where you can get sign up for trainings if that's what you decide to do. Because all three of those applications require that someone goes through a training, a facilitator training, because that person at the district or school level is the one that guides the school in terms of getting that account, the licensing and all of that. You have to have one of those people in order to get one of the applications. Any questions? Okay. PBIS eval. Now, Kristen, I know you said this is what you're most interested in. This is the application that I am the least familiar with because I've never worked with a school with PBIS evaluation. I've been through the training at different times, and I'm actually need to get back to you in terms of how are we providing this training. We used to have groups of people sign up that were from the same state or cohort or district, and they would go through a training with one of our trainers. I don't know how we're doing this now. Oh, I know that there's been, I believe, a series of online courses developed, but I'm going to get that information and I'll be sure and get back to you on that because this has changed of how we're getting training people on this particular application. It's different. PBIS eval helps team assess whether schools across a district, across a state, across a certain cohort are implementing PBIS, are engaged in PBIS implementation and how well they're doing. And what the effects of PBIS implementation are on student behavior. And the way that it does this is it takes data from the Swiss Suite and data from PBIS assessment. So your fidelity assessments and your outcome data from the Swiss Suite and pulls those things together so that you can look at both fidelity of implementation and outcome data in one application. You can see it together. Okay. So that's why it's a little bit different. It's also generally, it's a little more expensive. And it's not generally adopted school by school. It's adopted by a district or, again, a cohort of schools. It's not, you can look at data school by school, but generally it's used to evaluate a larger group of organizations. Okay. So that's what that looks like. So yes, you can look at it one at a time. That's really the Swiss Suite and PBIS assessment are site-based, whereas PBIS eval looks at all the schools in your district or a small group of in a district or a region or a state. And then you can customize that too. So maybe your whole state or your whole district is using PBIS eval, but you just want to look at the elementary data. You can create cohorts so that you can just look at your elementary schools. How is our fidelity of implementation and what do our outcomes look like for our elementary schools? What about our middle schools, our high schools, or secondary schools? And again, you can look at any single school within your scope as well. So to become a PBIS evaluation, is it coordinator? Coordinator, is that right, Danielle? Do we call them coordinators as well? There is a different training that's done, and you're really getting trained not just to support one school, but multiple schools for the most part. So it probably wouldn't be super useful if you're just working with just one or two schools. You'd want to be working with a little larger cohort in order to use this. So usually with PBIS evaluation, you have a school district or some leadership team that is initiating this. And then there's an evaluation team that includes an admin, maybe the PBIS coach or some district evaluators. There's a form. See, I just don't know if this is 100% true, but there's a form somewhere, and I'm going to find it, that you submit a form and you schedule an online training. I think what we did when Jessica left, one of our trainers left, is she created a whole online training for this. So you don't necessarily have to schedule something. You can do these modules on your own. And it's not a certification training. It's nothing like that. It's actually something you engage in, and we don't certify you. And the training doesn't cost anything, because it's not a certification training, but the application, to get the application PBIS evaluation, that's what costs money. And it is more expensive. I can't remember. It's like $1,500 maybe for a district, or maybe it's, I don't remember exactly because we're changing the pricing, but that's something you can easily get from support at PBISapps.org. You can email us and we can give you all that information.
Hey, Nad, I'm just looking, I'm going to add a little bit because I know
Yes.
about PBIS evaluation. So I just put a link in the chat to go to the evaluation page. The pricing is for a district, it's $500 a year. A region, which maybe that's like an ESD, is $750 a year, and a state's $1,000 a year. I'll say years ago, I was a district PBIS coordinator here in the Portland area, and we used PBIS eval. And so it was helpful. Like if I was presenting to our district leadership team about how are our schools doing, I could share this data. I could share it by like, here's the elementary, here's the middle, here's the high schools. They might share that with their school board, other stakeholders like that. So it can be, that's kind of how I've seen it used. And again, it like Nat said, it summarizes different pieces that are already in there. So if you're doing the TFI, if you're using Swiss, it can combine some of that information. And as a district coordinator with 19 schools, it was super helpful to have this. Like it was worth $500 to have that. Yeah.
No worries. Thank Bung. Kristen, is this helpful? Is this giving you a better picture of eval?
Thumbs up. Yeah.
Like, where's that mute button? Okay. So this is just an example of some of the evaluation. And thanks so much for jumping in, Danielle. Again, Danielle has been a PBIS coach working with districts, and so she gives a different perspective to this. I've been in my office at at the university for a little too long. So I haven't used evaluation as personally or as clearly as Danielle has. So that's pretty awesome. So again, just some of the reports that you can get. And as you can see, it's like it can pull your check and check out data along with your TFI data. You can look at a certain number of schools, which schools you want to look like. You can really design or customize the information you want to look like based on which schools you're working with. And gives you a nice picture of that. It's a nice tool. Danielle, would you say that this is a tool that frequently is used to give information at a broader level, like at the district, state, or region level, less about showing what's happening to your school staff?
Totally.
It's going to be a bigger picture,
right,
that you're going to give to funders and folks that control your money.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So PBISapp.org, you can look at PBIS assessment to get all this information. I mean, you can look at PBISapps.org to get this information about PBIS assessment. The demo account for Swiss, you can play around in there. Anytime you click on demos, I'm going to go there right now. And I'll show you also where to find the evaluation video. I just want to show you all where you can learn more about each one of these on our website. Sorry, that keeps coming up. I need to change my picture.
No, you don't. She's beautiful.
Well,
That's Ann's daughter, Sophie.
But I keep telling people I put that up there. I don't usually have a huge picture of her up there. But I was having a rough day one time, and I think Sophie looks really fierce in that photo. And so I kind of, it inspired me. So I put it up there. She'd probably be horribly embarrassed, but that's all right. She doesn't live here anymore. She's a big girl. All right. So for demos, you can click here on demos. And when I do that, I can look at the Swiss suite of applications. There's also an early childhood Swiss, which is very similar to our Swiss, except it has labels that are more relevant to early childhood settings. And then you can look at the demo for PBIS assessment, and there's actually a video right here for PBIS eval. So if you're looking for, we don't have a demo account for PBIS eval, but we have a video. Let me go back and show you where that is. You just go to demos and then click on PBIS eval, and a demo of a video comes up. So you can, it walks you through PBIS eval, which clearly it would behoove me to go through that video again because I haven't done it in a while. Okay. Then in terms of resources, we have lots of videos available. We have different publications available. Any of these, and you can click on any of those and you can say, well, I want to learn more about Swiss. So I just click on Swiss. My resources are then organized by that application, or maybe it's PBIS assessment. I want to see all the stuff that we have around PBIS assessment. So lots of different resources you can use to learn more about each one of these. I am interested to know, I'm going to check to find out. Oh, PBIS evaluation orientation. Is this the same video I just showed you, or is this different? So under videos, there is now a PBIS evaluation orientation, and you can start this course. It's an online course, and that would be a really good way, in addition to that video I showed you a minute ago, to walk through PBIS evaluation. It's kind of an online training course for that. You can always call us and get more information. I think for right now, Alan is our expert on that. But Danielle's probably a good resource as well for that. So just email support. Oh, I'm over. Okay. I'm over by 8 minutes. I thought I had until 12:45, but I'm going to wrap it up. Any questions I can answer? Thanks, Danielle.
I wanted to share a couple of resources with folks, especially since people said there's a few Californians here. We will be, members of our team will be at a couple conferences that are coming up in October. And I'll put those in the chat, but there is the California PBIS conference in Sacramento, and then there's the National Forum, National PBIS Forum in Chicago in October as well. So look for us there. Those are great opportunities to learn more about this, hear us present, that kind of thing. So dropping those in there.
Thanks, Danielle. Any questions I can answer? If not, feel free to sign off.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you again, Kristen.
Good to see you too.
And for those of you that were on the webinar right before this, I'll try to have someone else do this, these two in a row, so you never have to hear my voice for this long at a time.